All this damage and death can be traced back to one man, Alex Karp, the demon that walks the earth, claiming to be a savior to the people of the Western world with involvements in the CIA, ICE, Ukraine, military actions in the Middle East, and soon to be Terminator robots weaponized here in the US.
Now, this episode of Mograph Monday is a little bit different as I'm the one who actually made the original animation you just saw. I'll just be going ahead and reteaching it inside of this episode. This Mograph Monday also incorporates elements from the past 3 previous Mograph Mondays. As like I said, there are a bunch of elements from each that I've incorporated into this project here. I might go ahead and stick with that format of releasing like 3 Mograph Monday videos with like separate topics and effects and animations, and then having like a 4th one to tie everything all together. Now, like always, I'll be providing a link to the assets used so you can go ahead and follow along. Down in the description, there will be a Discord link to go ahead and join my Discord. I'm kind of soft launching the Discord server. I'll probably like make an ad for it sometime soon and advertise it a little bit more. But once you've joined the server, go ahead into the Mograph Monday channels and just click the link here for the 4th Mograph Monday, and it'll send you to a Google Drive where you can go ahead and download that file. But without talking too much, let's get into the 4th episode of Mograph Monday. Okay, so once you go ahead and unzip the file here, you should be left with these folders here inside. So I'm going to go over into the footage, and then I'm going to grab the one that says main and just pull that into my timeline. As always, we're going to be doing this inside of a Fusion composition. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab the Fusion clip and drag that to the time stamp of 2 seconds and 3 milliseconds and end it off at 9 seconds and 18 milliseconds. Just drag that along. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this by just holding Alt and then dragging across and then placing it at 8 seconds and 14 milliseconds. Then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to duplicate it and then place this at 13 seconds and 24 milliseconds. And then just drag this over to the end here. And that should be good. I'm going to go over into my Fusion clip and then pulling up our folder here. I'm going to go back into the Karp and I'm going to go ahead and select the first one like so. Go back and then click the one that says FX here. All this is the halftone effect. So for users who don't know, you could actually go ahead and copy any bit of nodes in Fusion, and then when you paste it into a text document or any type of Word format, it'll paste out the code. So I'm just going to go ahead and right click this, hit select all. I'm going to go ahead and copy and then paste this in. So I'm going to go ahead and view this in our first viewer. I'm going to pipe this over into the bitmap here, and then I'm going to go ahead and merge this on top. So then when we go ahead and view this, you can see we get that nice halftone effect. It's gone ahead and added the halftone to the alpha, which we don't want. So we're going to go ahead now and just place this into the mask, and it gets rid of all of that. Now, these are the exact settings I used, so you don't really need to change anything unless, you feel like you need to tweak things. I'll copy our main and then I'll paste it into here like so whilst viewing the second viewer. While selecting it, go ahead into the blend mode or the apply mode, sorry, and change this over into darken. So when we zoom in here, it adds the color into the halftone and makes it almost like a comic book effect. I'm actually going to go ahead and select this again and just bring the blend mode down a bit so it has less of an effect. So now to make the paintbrush effect that swipes over his eyes that we used in episode 1 of Mograph Monday, which then reveals the text with the follower modifier on. Now, like I said, it was in episode 1 of Mograph Monday, so I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste the effect over, but I will explain how it works. If you want a full step-by-step from start to finish though on the effect, you can go back and watch the first Mograph Monday, which I explained fully how to make that effect. So if I just go ahead and paste this like so, and I'll merge this over and then have this into the mask input, and we're gonna actually just view this effect here. Okay, so we have our background here with the rectangle masking out the shape, and then I have another one that just reveals it from start to finish there. Then we get a displacement node using a fast noise input that displaces it and gives it this paintbrush effect. Then I went ahead and rotated it with the transform and then added the text with the follower modifier seen here. So then altogether we get this. To finish off our node tree here, I'm going to go ahead and add a dream glow and Peach's inner shadow. The inner shadow is actually part of Peach's all effects pack, which brings AE tools to Resolve. He has a huge video covering every single macro inside of the pack, and I was actually lucky enough to be a part of the beta team to test out some of these effects. So if you're interested, make sure you click that affiliate link in the description will take you to this page, and then use code Eli at checkout to get 11% off your purchase. However, if you don't want to purchase this whole pack just for the inner shadow, I will leave a link in the description to an alternative inner shadow. If you don't already have Dream Glow, I'll leave a link in the description to where you can go ahead and download that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pipe this into the Dream Glow. This is actually the second Dream Glow, and you can see it's quite a dramatic glow, but that's all good. I'm going to show you the settings I used in order to make it look a lot nicer. So first off, I'm going to change the white to red here, the glow, and I'm just going to head and enable tint. Immediately that changes it to red. I'm going to change the high and low values to something like this will do. I'm going to move the radius ever so slightly and then move down the exposure to somewhere around 0.3, 0.39. We will go ahead and animate certain things later on, so these settings just need to be somewhere around here for now. And with the inner shadow, we're going to do the same thing and just make this look a lot better for now. So first off here, we're going to go ahead and move this blur size to somewhere around 93. Something like that will do. I'm just going to tweak the center here and just push this over a little bit to the right. Something like that will do. And then I'm just going to bring the size down to 0.91 somewhere. Something like that looks pretty good to me. So now that we have our main subject prepped and ready for animation, we're going to spend time now in making the assets that appear around him, like the articles and that news headline that appears before him that's glitching. So back in our folder here, we're going to go over into articles and just select these four here and then drag this into our comp. Okay, so just moving aside here, I'll just go ahead and delete the merges that are attacked, and we can just view this first article here. Now, in order to get this prepped and ready to be put inside our clip, we first need to do two things to it. We first need to remove the background in order to have just the text visible, and then depending on how far away it is from the camera, we'll be adding a blur node to simulate the camera focus, as we won't be activating it in the actual camera node. So hitting shift space here whilst this is selected, we're going to type in chroma key here, add that in, shift space again. I'm going to add a defocus gamma, and then by viewing our chroma key here and then just dragging over the negative space, it just goes ahead and removes that background. Now, because for most of our animation, the background is black, and if we zoom in closely here, you can see that there's a rough black edge to the border, which is fine. We don't need to touch that because, as I said before, our background is going to be black, so it doesn't really matter too much. But in future projects, if that is something you want to go ahead and change, you can go ahead over into your matte control. Now, what I usually do is blur it slightly and then just bring down that threshold. And if I just do it dramatically here, you can see that it really takes away from the edges. But as I said before, it doesn't really matter too much, so I'll just leave it as that. Now, you just want to go ahead and repeat these steps for the rest of the assets. Okay, so once that is added now, we're going to go back into our asset. Going back into Carp, we're going to go ahead and drag this first clip here, or first photo I should say, and we're just going to isolate the news title here. I'm actually going to do this inside of the first viewer, and I'm going to do this with a polygon node. So just quickly going over here and selecting four corners in order to connect them up like so. And then when I connect them into our photo, we get the cutout. Whilst it's selected, we're going to shift space. We're going to add a luma here and adjust the low and the high values like so. I'm going to add scan lines. Over in line frequency, we're going to change that to 17.91, change this to 1.27, and the angle at 106. Just going to go ahead and split my viewer here and drag in a fast noise and have this appear in the first screen. First, I'm going to go into color, gradient, and just pinch these like so. So they're very close together. Going over back into noise. Now it's time to make the glitch effect. I actually did use this in one of my Cyberpunk edits and I explained how I did that, but I'm just going to quickly gloss over it again just to refresh your memory if you haven't seen that video already. And then I went ahead and changed my settings to this, which then if we go ahead and add a displace and we go ahead and connect them like so, we do get that glitch effect. Starting off with a background here and pages. I think this is in this free pack. With these settings here, I'm just going to go ahead and merge this and place this at the bottom. I'm going to hit shift space and type in grid and then bring in a background here and just pipe this into the grid and merge this into our tree. Selecting the grid here, I'm going to change the width all the way down until it disappear, so right around here. And then I'm just going to copy and paste this over. I'm going to change the major line width all the way down to 0 and then change the width to 0.993. And then going over into settings, I'm just going to lower the opacity. Something around here will do. And then I'm just going to go ahead and lower the alpha all the way, so then we can see the polka dots. All right, we're going to go ahead and make the animation to make this a little bit more interesting. So we're going to bring in a fast noise and a background. I'm going to split the viewer here and then view the fast noise. With the fast noise, I'm going to go over into my color. I'm going to change this over into gradient. And then like before, we're going to go ahead and bring these closer together, but not as tight as we did in the last fast noise. Selecting the black here, I'm just going to put the alpha all the way down to 0. And then going back into noise, I'm going to change the detail to 2.6. I'm going to change the contrast to 2.56. I'm going to change the brightness to minus 0.58. Going over into scale, I'm going to increase this all the way to around 6.46. And then going over into scale, I'm going to change it to 6.46. And then with the sheath rate, I'm going to increase this to somewhere around here. Then with the background selected, I'm going to go ahead and merge this on top and then copy and paste this and remove the alpha of this. And then in the one we pasted, I'm going to go ahead and just drag this and paste it into the mask input. And then once we drag this in and play our clip, we can see that the fast noise here is in action. All right, so we're going to go ahead now and make this a little bit more visible by adding glow. I'm going to do this with Dream Glow, and I'm going to increase the luminance value almost to the end and then decrease the radius by quite a bit. Then I'm just going to go ahead and switch the inputs and pipe this into the green arrow and then into. So then when we go ahead and decrease the blend, so then we should get something like this. I did go ahead and change my contrast here, and I'm actually going to go ahead now and lower my radius a little bit more. Okay, so for the text here, put in all caps and just type in one man here. And then I'm also going to change the font as well. I'll leave a link in the description where you can go ahead and download this font so you can follow along as well. I'm going to change the size to this. And then I'm also going to change the tracking to this as well. Okay, after that, I'm going to split them into two. So just duplicate them. So copy and paste. Again, adding Page's inner shadow with these settings here. And then I'm going to add a rectangle node, and I'm just going to mask out the one in the M, and then I'm just going to invert this like so. And then I'm going to copy the rectangle, paste it, and then uninvert that too. Then I'm going to go ahead and merge these together, and I'm actually going to go ahead and delete this and replace it with an instance. So Control C to copy and then Control Shift V to paste the instance, because we're going to be activating the follower modifier. So going over into our text here, right clicking and then hitting follower, it opens up the follower modifiers tab. So then click the shading tab, going into position and then offset here, right clicking and then hit modify with XY path. And then deselect this triangle here, as well as this one as well. And going over into keyframe 1, not 0, but keyframe 1. And then putting a keyframe at Y, and then going over into frame 21, and then placing another keyframe. Clicking the arrow to bring us back to that first keyframe. We're just going to drag it down till it disappears from our screen. And then when I pull up the spline graph here, I'm just going to go ahead and make it really sharp like so. One last thing here until I'm done with the follower modifier is going back over into shading, placing a keyframe on keyframe 1 with the opacity, and then going to keyframe 0 and placing 1 there, and then placing this all the way down to 0. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and add transforms to the end of these. I'm also going to bring in a background and merge this on top of that. Just bringing the alpha down to 0. Unchecking auto resolution here, I'm going over into width and then typing in 2871, which just extends our image here and gives us room for animation. So going back into the transforms here, going over into frame 24 and this transform here, I'm going to place down a keyframe and then placing a keyframe on 62. And then I'm just going to move this along here. Somewhere around here will do. We can tweak this later on. And then I'm going to just do the same keyframes for our first side right here. And then going over into the last one, I'm just going to place this over like so. And for now with the spline, I think I'm just going to leave it pretty simple because we will be just tweaking them around later on. Add a defocus gamma and I'll show you why. I'm just going to bring this down later on. Okay, so now that we have our main thing sorted, we can actually go ahead now and translate all of these into our 3D space and then build upon that. select and add the animations to the places that we need to. We're going to the front here, grabbing a camera, grabbing a renderer and a image plane and just merging those together. I'm going to go over into renderer like always and changing it to hardware renderer, anti-aliasing, and then I'm going to go over and change this to 1 just so it helps our render a little bit more. And then splitting the viewer here and viewing our 3D space. I'm just going to go ahead now and add our first subject in. And to keep things organized here, I'm just going to go ahead and group these. So selecting all of this. So selecting all of this and just hitting Ctrl G to group that, and then double clicking here so then we can see everything inside of the group. I'm just going to go ahead and connect this into our image planer, and then view the render here inside of our other screen. I'm gonna go ahead and pull the camera back so we can actually see what we're working with here. Just to improve the playback here, I'm gonna go ahead and just deselect the dream glow and as well as the inner shadow as well. I'm gonna go over and I'm actually gonna go ahead and change our camera settings. I'm just gonna go ahead and increase our angle of view to somewhere around 69.8, and then going ahead and just changing our focal length to just 8.5. And what that does is it widens the lens of the camera, allowing it to see much more, but it also pushes things further back as well. And that's why I changed the camera settings first, so then we can go ahead and add everything else later on without it being messy and having to change things around because we changed the camera settings. So just pushing this forward here like so. Okay, so I went ahead and just pre-put everything where they needed to be, with our main subject here with this translation on the Z-axis, our background with these translations here, as well as I increased the size and the rotation. And with the words, I did the same thing. So I just moved the translations and then I decreased the size. Now with the camera here, if I just go ahead and move this in and out of our scene, you can see that there's quite a fair bit of parallax, and that is to do with the settings we had changed. If I just go ahead and replace the camera with just a regular camera and show the difference here, you can see quite a difference here with the amount of parallax as well as the size of the background compared to the main subject in comparison with our second camera here, which offers quite a bit of parallax. I actually used these camera settings in one of my recent edits, and I actually prefer these camera settings because it kind of makes everything a bit more 3D, if that makes sense. And I probably will spend time in maybe future videos and edits with playing around with the camera settings and figuring out what works best. Bringing in a transform, a 3D transform, adding this in, going over to 105, I'm already at there, so I'm just going to place a keyframe here on the Z axis, and then going over all the way into the first keyframe, so keyframe 0, and then just placing one there. Going back to that keyframe we made earlier, I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in by quite a fair bit. Something like this will do. I'm actually going to go into the camera here and just bring this down so it's a little bit more in the center. We don't want it all the way in the center here. We can see with the guidelines, I just hit Ctrl G to get that up. So then when we played back, we get this animation here with the graph looking something like this. So then if I go back into the edit tab and just wait for this to cache out, then we should get something that looks like this, which is looking good so far. Of course, I'll tweak the graphs later on, but for now, that looks pretty good to me. So the next thing I'm going to add is that news headline, and then just positioning that where I want it to be, like so. And then once that is done, we're going to start adding the articles that appear around our subject. Now, this step is completely up to you on how you want to go ahead and arrange these. If you want to go ahead and make it similar to mine, by all means do so. Just like in our previous Mograph Monday where I gave you access to the clouds asset and left it for you to play around, it's pretty much the same thing, but with these articles here. Okay, so one last thing is I moved back the text here because it was clipping the field of view that we changed earlier. So I went ahead and just moved it back a tiny bit, and now I'm actually going to go ahead and just increase the size a little bit as well. And with everything all together, we should get something along the lines of this. Now looking back at the original, you can tell that there's a couple more effects added on, and I'm going to go ahead and add that inside of an adjustment layer above. So just pulling this down here and then adding an adjustment clip and dragging this to the very end for now. We're going to enter the adjustment clip. If we hit shift space and just type in lens distort, and just hit the lens distortion here, and then going ahead and adding that into our clip. Going over into distortion, I'm going to change my values to this, and it gives us that exaggerated lens distortion here. I'm going to go ahead and hit the lens distort and type in FX Chroma, which I believe is a tool from Reactor. And then I'm just going to increase the size by just a tiny bit here. And as you can see here, it gives us that nice chromatic aberration on the borders of our footage here because I went ahead and increased the size. If I did want the chromatic aberration to be on all of the image, I would go ahead into the center and just change that. And as you can see there, it's got a nice chromatic aberration on everything, but I just went ahead and have it on the edges. Okay, so next we're going to add a nice blur around our image, which I actually used this technique in one of my previous tutorials, the magnifying lens tutorial, but I'll quickly go over how I did that. So first we have this background here, and then I've got a white background here with an ellipse masking out the center with these settings here, and then merge that on top of the black. So we get the nice black in the middle and then the white on the outside. With the vary blur, I changed my settings like so, and then when placed together, it gives us that nice blur where the white from our background here is to our image. And then finally, I'm just going to go ahead and add a background like so, and then an ellipse. Just going to stretch this out like so, and then just invert this. I'm going to bring the soft edge up by quite a bit. Something like that will do. And then I'll just decrease the level to somewhere around there. And then we can see the before and after. It just gives us that nice vignette. And then to make it look like it's been looked through a TV screen or like a monitor screen here, we're going to go ahead and add a grid. I'm going to change the grid line to black, put down the majority line, and then place these both at 100. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. I'm going to go over into the blend and just bring that down by quite a bit. Something like that will do. As you can see, it's very subtle here, but it just adds to it, I think. If you want, you can increase it, but I'm just going to leave this as that. So then when we go back into our timeline, you can see that already that is becoming very close to our original. Now, this adjustment clip is going to be quite intensive on your system. So for now, I'm actually going to go ahead and disable it in order for our playback to be way better. But now that's sorted, we can go back and finish off the animation. Okay, so selecting our main subject here, going over into frame 58 and just placing a keyframe here on the blend. And then we're going to go all the way to 101 and just placing a keyframe there. And we're going to lower this till it's almost black and white. So somewhere like that will do. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and activate our inner shadow here. And then going into frame 20, we're going to place a keyframe here on the size. And then going over into frame 64, I'm going to go ahead and place another keyframe. So going back to this first keyframe here, I'm going to decrease the value here to it's pretty much almost all the way full. And then going over to frame 94 here, I'm going to place another keyframe on that. And then going over into frame 141, I'm going to place a keyframe there as well. And then also do the same. But this time I'm going to decrease it to where it's almost dark, but we can still make out the words here. Okay, so now that we've done with the shadow, we can go ahead and animate the dream glow. So going over into frame 20, I'm going to hit a keyframe here on opacity, and then going over into frame 64, I'm going to hit another keyframe on the opacity. I'm going to bring this down to the first one and make this 0, pulling up our spline, hitting Ctrl A and then F to flatten it out, and then just bringing this across, making sure my graph looks something like this. Going over into frame 94, and just putting a keyframe down there, and then going into frame 141, putting that keyframe there, dragging that down to 0. And then if I just increase my graph, I'm going to drag these two to select, then hitting F and just smoothing them out. So then when everything played together, we get something that looks like this. Which is looking very close to the original. Okay, so for the next part of the animation where it pans out into the map, I actually did go ahead and make this effect inside of my second Mograph Monday, but I'll just quickly go over things. So we have the animation of the fast noise here with these settings, and then with the two sides of the map separated and merged together. I also added a brightness contrast and activated the alpha and just brought that down. Then going over into the P image emitter with these settings here, as well as changing the style to bitmap and then having this for the rectangle, we are left with this animation here. Now you might be thinking why I went ahead and added a 3D renderer to this, if we could just go ahead and connect the renderer into our 3D scene. Well, I actually did go ahead and do this because having it rendered out then allows us to apply glow to our effect, which then we can go ahead and pipe into an image plane and then add that into the scene. So if I just type in dream glow here and view that, I can go ahead and then just pipe that into our 3D scene. So I'm going to go ahead now and just add in another transform and then go over into frame 95. I'm going to place a keyframe on the X and Z and then go over into 195 here. Then on the last keyframe, I'm just going to move this over like so, and we can see that our original text here is visible. So going back into our text and dragging this across, I'm actually going to go ahead, I'm going to add in a brightness and contrast, then activating the alpha and then going to a point where it zooms past the letters like here. I'll place 2 keyframes and then on the second one I'll bring the alpha all the way down to 0. So then when we go back, we can see that the letters have disappeared. So whilst we're here, we can also animate the defocused for the text. So going back to the very beginning here, I'm going to place a keyframe here on the size, and then to where the camera passes to somewhere around here, I'll place the size like so. I'm going to change this over into this lens type, and now I'm only going to view the text here. Opening up the spline and pulling up the text, pulling this up here with the graph, I'm going to have it just flattened out and bring down the curve like so. I'm going to have the animation like this, and I'm actually going to go ahead and bring this slightly forward a bit and go ahead and increase the defocus size. Okay, another thing we can do whilst we are here as well is change the opacity for the news title here. So I'm just going to add a brightness and contrast like I did before, going over into the alpha and just lowering that ever so slightly. I can also go back to the beginning and place a keyframe on the gain, going over into frame 25 and placing a keyframe there as well, going back to that first slider and bringing that all the way down, or at least till it's kind of visible. So going back to the transform that we made earlier, I'm pulling it up in the spline. Again, Control A, then F to flatten out, and then when we hit T, it pulls up our ease in and ease out, and I'm just going to change the values like this. I'm actually going to go ahead and make this a tighter. I think something around here will do. And then if I just go back into the news headline here and select the image plane here and just go over into frame 170, I'm going to place a keyframe here on the X and the Z, and then going over into 95 and placing a keyframe there too, sending us back to that first or the last keyframe, sorry. I'm going to bring this down here and this across. I'm gonna bring this back a little bit further. Something like this will do. And I'm actually gonna go ahead and even bring down the opacity just a lot more. And then selecting the image plane, I'm gonna do the exact same. So Control A, F, and then smoothing it out to be something like that, which will give us something that looks along the lines of this. From the first Mograph Monday, we're going to add another 3D transform and add some modifications to it to make it look like the camera is being handheld as it's animated. So I'm going to right click on our X here and then going over into modify with and then hit shake. And I'm going to do the same thing for our Y as well. Going over into the modifiers here, whilst our Y is selected, I'm going to change the maximum to 0.038 and then our smoothness to 13.78. Going over into the X, I'm going to change our maximum here to 0.017 and then our smoothness to 15.16. And then when we go ahead and drag that over into our clip here, you can see that immediately it's changed the positioning. So when we go ahead and play back, we should get something that looks like this. And as you can see, playing this back, we can see a definite shake here, emulating kind of someone holding the camera. We are going to decrease the value though as it pans out and shows the map. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Just to identify it quickly, I'm going to right click, hit set color and just change this to orange here. Going to the modifiers, placing a keyframe here on the smoothness, same thing for the other one, and then skipping to when it pans out and just bringing up the smoothness. And I'll do the same thing for this last one here. We can now go ahead and add our final transform, placing a keyframe here at 181 and then one at the end here, and then just moving the camera so it pans over to the left hand side here. And I'll just pull this into the graph and have the graph looking something like this. I'm going to go ahead now and add in a brightness contrast here, and then placing a keyframe on the gain, going back to that first keyframe that we placed or around there, and then placing the value to 0, and then have the same graph. Okay, so once we are happy with that animation, we can go ahead and move on to the second part of the edit, which is the cards that swipe over from the screen from right to left, which lead us then to the article. So in order to do that, I'm going to make another timeline here. Okay, so bringing in a fusion composition and then just dragging this out by quite a bit. I'm going to go back to my original timeline here and just make sure that it's longer than the second clip, which it is, which is fine. Going into this, I'm going to bring one of the clips that I want to add into this. I'm just going to go ahead and make the card here. I'm going to make this white like so. I added a rectangle here with this setting. Then with the clip, I want to go ahead and add, I'll just paste that in, and then adding another rectangle. I'm going to outline where I want this clip to be. So adding a transform here and just scaling this up. You can see here that it clips the edges when you go ahead and expand it. I also want the edges to be inside as well. So I'm going to connect this into the mask input here, and I did already change it to minimum. It should be on merge. If you go ahead and change it to minimum, it will then be on the inside of our clip. This is when you can go ahead and customize the Polaroid here. You can add as much writing or as information you want to be added to the Polaroid at the top of the bottom. That's completely up to you. But now, once this is done, then I can go ahead and duplicate this 3 more times. And then for each of the times coming in here to this fusion, I just quite literally swap out the media. Of course then, so for clips like this where you can see the screen recording here, instead of going back and trimming it out and then compound clipping it and bringing it in, you just go over to the globe in and out here and just pull this back until it disappears, and then that will start from where you want it to start. Also as well, I'm just going to go ahead and hit loop because some of the clips aren't long enough, and I'm going to go back and do the same for this one as well. And then once that is done, I'm going to compound clip this and just name this card 1. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of the clips and compound that and name them card 2 all the way up to card 4. So going over into the original edit here, I'll just quickly break down how I did this because it is quite simple if you already have a decent knowledge on Resolve, but you should be able to follow along otherwise. So again, I had the cards selected. So we have card 4 or card 1 all the way up to card 4 here. And then I just added them in with a merge with the background set to 0, as it's just setting the resolution and it's just something to build on. I then also did the same with the other article and basically had a linear movement of it just swiping over like so until it then reaches the end. To make it a little bit more interesting, I added a transform here just to scale it up, merged it, and then brought that merge all the way down. So then when we go back, we can actually see sort of like a ghost effect, just making the image a lot more interesting. And then inside of the last fusion node we placed on our timeline, we have the article zoomed in here, and then the animation is it just swiping in. I did this original animation by adding in a background here with the rectangle. It's kind of highlighting where I wanted the words to be highlighted. And then with another rectangle set to subtract, I just animated it swiping, so it has a reveal effect. And then for underneath that, I changed the blend mode to darken. If I just change it back to normal, you can see it just gets rid of the text here, but changing it to darken allows it for the text to be visible, literally like a highlighter. Went ahead then and added another background and just keyed out the photo here because I felt like it was ugly. It didn't really look nice. And then all of this is just positioning things, and then that is it. And on this one, for some reason, looking back, I don't know why I did this, but I brought that node tree we made earlier inside of the adjustment clip into the actual fusion comp. That's what this is over here. Okay, so now jumping back into the main original timeline here, I've got these 2 adjustment clips just scattered around here, and what those are, the focus gammas. And I had the graph looking like this, emulates a focus, or like an automatic focus, I guess, in a camera where it's trying to find where the subject is, and it kind of bleeds in and out of focus. And I thought that just helped it look more visually appealing. And from the transition from the fusion, the second fusion compound, into the third one here, I did something similar, but this time it cuts off at the very, almost at the end point here, so where it's blurred quite a bit. And then I had it inside finish off the blur from this, the focus here, which the graph looks like this. So altogether we are left with that effect. There are a few other things I went and did just to polish it off. So I actually did go ahead and add a posterized time and just brought the FPS down to 17. I'll leave a link to where you can get the posterized time, but it's literally the same as the stop motion node. I just like using this because then you can actually input the amount of frames you want. I also then went in and added film burns. Now, the reason I haven't included some of these film burns inside of the pack is that I believe I purchased some of these and I wasn't sure which ones I did purchase and which ones I did get for free. I'm just trying to be careful in case I accidentally leak something, but you can definitely go on the internet and just find a bunch of free film burns. This film burn here, it has like sort of a chromatic aberration to it, or like it just looks a little different. And the way I did that was with the compositing, the composite mode. So if I change this to normal here, or add, which is the one I usually do, you can see it's just a regular film burn, but then changing it over into difference gives us this effect, which I think is pretty cool. And then lastly, I also went and added these particles because I still am not quite up to where I want to be with using particles in Resolve. So I went ahead and just downloaded a free stock version and then going ahead and changing the composite mode to add. And with everything, should give you our final result. Thank you for the people who have made it all the way to the end of the video, but I'll catch you guys in the next video.